SpaceX's boring company has just built a tunnel boring machine that's 20 times faster than the ones they've been using. We could see these machines start to build new tunnels across America within a couple of years. But what if we told you there was already a big boring company project well underway that had nothing to do with tunnels? Because while SpaceX is still digging their tunnels under Las Vegas, they're also building their very own city in South Texas. And earlier this month, the people of Boca Chica got to decide whether Elon Musk's Starbase would officially become a city. And even though it seemed like a foregone conclusion, it wasn't until the last minute that we learned the final results. And now that we know how the votes were cast, it turns out that Starbase may not have been a democracy after all. On December, the residents of the small community of Boca Chica overwhelmingly voted to incorporate their area into the city of Starbase, Texas. The election results showed that 73% of voters supported the proposal, with only 27% voting against it. This means that the incorporation of Starbase is official. The change will take effect on May, at which point Starbase will become its own independent city, complete with its own mayor and city council, which will replace the existing commissioner's court of the county where it's located. And it looks like it will be pretty much exactly what SpaceX wanted. They asked for the right to govern themselves over anything that happens in the city limits, including all the beachfront property, which amounts to quite a bit of real estate. It's not surprising that so many people would want to vote for this change, because SpaceX has brought a lot of good things to Boca Chica. Since their arrival, they've helped modernize a town that was struggling to function. For example, the CEO of SpaceX even stepped in personally to buy the local grocery store and turn it into a proper supermarket for the town. So when SpaceX offered to improve the quality of life for the people living there, it wasn't really much of a tough decision. Plus, SpaceX has completely changed the economic landscape of the region. In a place where before the most in-demand jobs were working at the post office or being a mechanic, SpaceX created a whole bunch of brand-new high-paying positions, and suddenly almost everyone can get a great job with great benefits right down the road from where they live. A decade ago, there was nothing in this small town that paid more than minimum wage. Now workers are getting hired to work on one of the most exciting rockets ever made, and they get to help push humanity closer to becoming a spacefaring civilization. So yeah, it makes sense why the people there would want SpaceX to basically run the town. In fact, it turns out that more than half of the registered voters in this recent election actually worked directly for SpaceX. Obviously, people who are employed by the company are going to have a vested interest in seeing the company succeed. But it's worth pointing out that these people weren't forced to vote the way that they did. After all, they're employed by a private company, so technically, they're free to leave at any time. And many of them likely wouldn't even need to look far to find another job, since SpaceX has practically taken over the entire economy of the small town. This isn't exactly a normal situation. It's unclear how common it is for employees to make up a majority of voters in a small town. But what is clear is that without the support of the people who work for SpaceX, none of this would have happened. You have to wonder what motivated them to vote the way that they did. According to reports, SpaceX wants the ability to better control the traffic patterns in and around the launch site. That might sound reasonable enough, but it turns out that they want to exert complete control over everything that happens within city limits, including controlling parking in city lots and the use of sidewalks. Some believe that SpaceX wanted to assume full ownership of the beaches in Boca Chica. While this might seem odd considering SpaceX has miles of beach frontage at their disposal, they still want to officially own it. If Starbase becomes an official city, SpaceX will have complete control over all of the parks in the city limits. Many of these parks are currently used by hunters during certain times of the year. And if SpaceX owns the land, then they'll have sole authority over who can use the parks, and when they can use them. And it's not just nature that SpaceX might have more control over than they already do. They'll also be in charge of public safety. Now, this doesn't mean that SpaceX will be hiring their own police force, but it does mean that they'll have a significant amount of say over how the police are allowed to operate in the city limits. Basically, SpaceX will have ultimate control over the roads, the beaches, the parks, and the cops. And that kind of scares us. So we see where a lot of the resistance to this initiative came from, even though the people voting against it were outnumbered, 2-1. And honestly, they probably knew that they were fighting a losing battle from the moment that they found out about the vote. Even if everyone in the town had voted against the formation of the new city, it still wouldn't have mattered because the Texas legislature passed a law that gave SpaceX permission to hold this vote in the first place. Of course, that's not the only reason why the NAIs were drowned out. After all, SpaceX has significantly improved the lives of nearly everyone who lives in the area. But it's definitely part of the reason. Another thing is that most of the nay voters probably didn't even know that the vote was happening in the first place. There were less than 100 registered voters in the area, but only 64 ballots were actually cast in the election. Most of the people who don't work for SpaceX either didn't know about the vote, or they didn't think it would make any difference. For the people who do work for SpaceX, they probably saw this vote as a no-brainer. If the company that you work for wants you to vote for something, it's usually best to go along with it. After all, you wouldn't want to jeopardize your position with the company. That's probably why most of the people who voted nay were from outside the company. Now, you might be wondering why the Texas legislature approved a measure that allowed SpaceX to effectively rig their own election in the first place. Well, it probably helped that SpaceX donated $100 grand to the campaigns of some important state politicians. And we can bet that those same politicians probably put in a good word for SpaceX when they had the chance. We're not saying that there was any funny business or backroom deals going on here. After all, SpaceX has done a lot of good for the people of Boca Chica. But it's always worth keeping in mind that politicians aren't known for making decisions that benefit the majority, especially when there's money involved. What SpaceX is doing in Boca Chica isn't illegal, but it is unprecedented. So it's hard to know what kind of ramifications this could have for other companies who want to do the same thing. So far, it looks like SpaceX is in charge. They've created a new city, but they're not running it like a typical city. They're not building infrastructure or providing services to the residents. Those things will still be handled by the county. And the city won't have a police force or a fire department either. But SpaceX will have more control over the city than most city governments have over their own towns. Elon Musk has said that SpaceX plans to increase the frequency of their launches from once per month to 3 per week. This is likely to both amuse and terrify the people who live near the launch site. And they won't have much say in the matter either. Starbase might not be a democracy, but it is a step in the direction of democracy. After all, the people who live near the launch site actually had a chance to vote on this issue. They just didn't have much of an option besides voting for the company that literally owns the town. Some see what SpaceX is doing as the future of urban development. If a company comes into town and builds a bunch of infrastructure, then employs the majority of the population, it makes sense that they would want to have some level of control over the town. On the other hand, some believe that what SpaceX is doing in Boca Chica is a step toward privatization. Cities are normally run by elected officials who are accountable to the people who live there. But with Starbase, the people have essentially given up all control to a single private company. What happens when one of these companies decides to stop acting in the best interest of the people who live there? We don't know what will happen in the coming months and years, but we do know that the people of Starbase have a lot to gain and potentially a lot to lose. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up today if you liked it. That is so important for getting our content out to more people. If you enjoy the content, then you'd probably also enjoy our weekly newsletter. So sign up with the link down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.